I've been starting seeds for fall and preparing for the change of season. It's getting cooler outside, which feels so nice, especially in the morning. The moon was in its light phase, so it was a good time to plant my above grounders. For centuries, people have been planting by the moon and signs because they studied the patterns of nature and the cosmos and how they impacted one another, almost operating as one single system. They knew that a tiny seed contains the memory and coding for what it's to become, even before entering this world. And that all the other elements, air, earth, sun, moon, and water, are needed to help it grow into its greatest potential. The perfect balance of these elements meant that the plant would grow big and strong, be healthy, and full of life. But if one of those elements is off or completely absent, the plant would be stunted, sick, or barely grow at all. They knew that we too play a big role in this process, not only in helping to maintain the perfect balance, but mainly by not upsetting it. We humans can be quite destructive, sometimes forgetting that we are a part of nature, not separate from it. And that when we do something like talk to the plant or lick the seed before we plant it into the earth, that seed will grow to give us the nutrients that our body may be missing, or receive the frequencies that can help it grow even bigger. It's a symbiotic relationship, one that has been deeply rooted within us since the beginning of our time of understanding. My favorite time to be in the garden is right after it rains, when the sun is hidden behind a veil of pale gray sky and the earth is soft like a sponge. Since we moved here 5 years ago, building the food forest was our top priority. We got right to work building the foundation and garden beds and added a fence to keep critters out. The fencing worked for years, until now. I noticed at the beginning of the spring season that many of my baby plants were being eaten. My dog found a small litter of bunnies, so I knew a rabbit got in there somehow. Once the baby bunnies were old enough to be moved, we transferred them out of the garden. And I thought that that would be the end of it. But as soon as I planted new seeds for fall, the young plants were being chewed on again.
Oh, yeah, okay, I know.
We examined the fence, added additional protection where we thought it was needed, and still, the plants were being eaten. So for a quick fix, I decided to protect what plants I had left and purchased a few cloches and added a barrier around some of my raised beds. And the garden, so today I'm going to be putting together some new raised beds that I got because I knew that the garden space, I've been having some issues, guys. I've been having some issues with rabbits. So the rabbits have been getting into my garden, and I know I mentioned that before. Earlier this season, I noticed little rabbits in the garden. We had little babies in there, and they were nibbling a lot of my new young plants and completely just destroying a lot of the starts that I had started at the beginning of the season. So that makes it really challenging to start anything successfully when it's just being eaten all the time. So what I did was purchase recently these covers. So these covers, these caged covers, are going over some of my plants right now to further protect them from being eaten any more than they already have. And I'm hoping that they're going to continue to grow. And I'm going to be starting some new starts so that way I can have some replacements if need be, and just replace the ones that I have lost, and further protect this garden. I thought that the rabbits were getting in on the far end of the garden that borders the woods, but we went through and actually added some additional hardware cloth along the bottom of the fence perimeter and really secured that so that way they couldn't dig in anymore. However, the rest of the garden looked fine. We went around the entire perimeter, inspected it, could not find any other place where they could potentially be getting in. So we thought that that was the trouble side, and we fixed it. However, I'm still having the issue. And when I went through several weeks ago, I found a little nest of babies that were still in here. We cleared that out, okay, with the help of my dog. We cleared those out. And so I thought that the problem was solved yet again, but I noticed some plants still being eaten, especially recently within the past week. And my husband, he saw a large rabbit jump over the fence, jump over the actual area of our fence that we have currently protected from little critters being able to dig under. So let me show you. Along the perimeter of the fence here, we have the hardware cloth, and that goes up about 12 inches. He has seen the rabbit jump over it into the garden. And it's a full-grown rabbit. So, and I can tell that that is indeed what must be happening, because this tall raised bed, which is about 16 inches high or so, 16 or 18 inches high, it managed to jump up here and eat all of the little plants that it could that were close to the border here. So you can see that spinach completely ate it, and even some of the beets, the beet greens, you can see here, ate that up. So I know that it has to be a larger rabbit who was able to kind of jump its legs up here on the top and just start nibbling away. Obviously it was too high for it to kind of jump into it, I think, but high enough, or rather I should say low enough, to where it was able to at least jump up and just start nibbling on what it could. So that is frustrating, and I'm trying to just go through. I actually bought some hardware cloth so that I can line the perimeter of my raised beds here, the ones that are a little lower to the ground, to just further protect these beds. The ones that are high like this, it has not been able to get to those. These are about 2 feet high. So those beds are actually tall enough. What I did also is purchase some new raised beds that I'm going to set up today, and then have those ready for plantings, because I plan on using the tall raised beds for all of our edible greens that we plan on eating throughout the season. And that way I can grow all of those in there, because it seems I have most success with our edible greens like that, like the kales, the lettuces, the beets, when I grow them in the tall beds as opposed to in the ground. I have tried both ways, and honestly, I keep them better protected when they are up higher. And so I'm planning on doing that going forward, just to be able to make it easier to get to and easier to manage. I grow a lot of edible perennials all throughout my garden, and some medicinal plants, because I love the medicinals. And so I grow those throughout the entire garden space: berries, fruit trees, edible greens like the arugula tree, medicinals like the comfrey. I have mulberry growing. I have elderberry. I have gooseberries. I have so many different edible plants as it is, but these beds, these raised beds, are where I think I want to start mainly focusing on all of my annual. We really don't do a lot of tomatoes. I stopped growing squashes, stopped growing cucumbers, anything like that we ended up with too much of it on hand. I am not a market gardener, so I do not sell any produce. I usually end up having to give them away to family and friends, which of course they love, but eventually they get tired too of receiving another zucchini from me, another cucumber or tomatoes. And so I decided to just stop doing those because they are so much maintenance every year. There's potential problems with them all the time that you have to constantly maintain and keep up on. And that's just how it is sometimes with the annuals. The perennials, not so much. Over time, they get very well established and they have less and less pest issues going forward. And when I can grow things like plantain, broadleaf plantain, which is edible greens, that a lot of these things that you don't really think about as being edible because you don't see them frequently in the store, but they are. And in most cases, they are even more nutritious than things like spinach or kale. So that's where my focus has been, is growing a lot of these edible perennial plants. And then, of course, focusing a little less on the annuals and doing those mainly inside of the raised beds. In the past years building the food forest garden, I wasn't really focused as much on the area near the house. The previous owners didn't do much other than plant a few plants and bushes, but I envisioned the space to be full of wild flowers. So I expanded it, added a stone border, and continued to fill it each year with more and more flowers. But this year, I noticed that the flower bed was getting out of control. Some of the plants that the previous owners planted were invasive and were spreading throughout the garden, choking other plants and causing so many issues. I was constantly cutting things back, pulling out dead plants that were choked out or being crowded out by others, and it quickly became a source of stress. So I decided to renovate the space. But that is a huge undertaking, one that I can't do by myself. So I asked for some help. I've been really busy preparing everything for fall and started to work on a major project. So you guys know that my flower garden here is something that I have been working on for the past several years or so, just expanding it, adding a lot more flowers, a lot of the wildflowers, even though I was filling it with, these wildflowers, and everything was starting to really grow in and look pretty wild and untamed. It was starting to become a lot more to maintain because the different growth stages of those types of flowers that I have in here all vary. And so I had a lot of things just constantly dying off, because of the end of its cycle. And it just became very messy and unsightly to kind of see the flower garden in that state. And so ultimately I decided to make this area just reinvent it, reimagine it, the space, because I want to create more spaciousness within the bed and redo the stone border, which has just been sinking over time. And we actually added an additional layer to that fence, or rather to the border, last year, I believe. And now that's even sinking. And so we want to redo that stone border with some larger stones. But right now, my biggest concern is just clearing it all out. I had some invasive plants growing in the space that I had a landscaper come out and take a look at, because this has just gotten out of control over the past couple years, especially. We've had a lot of issues with this viney stuff that is just growing and taking over the bed. And so I have wild grape that's just growing in the bushes up into the gutters of the house. And so that is something that needs to be addressed. A lot of that has even been choking out the other plants inside the garden bed. And so I knew that this year I was really going to have to think about this and get rid of a lot of those plants that the previous owners had planted that are invasive and just completely taken over the space, and replant in this some intentional, mindful plants that will be beautiful, give the area a certain energetic presence and uplift, and really just transform it and make it a lot easier to maintain going forward. And so that's what I'm going to do. And this project has already started. So obviously I did a lot of this work myself. My husband helped me dig up some of the roots. We had white mulberries that had started to grow in the garden, and they were getting already really big. I should have cut them down way sooner when I first spotted them, and I didn't. And so the end of the season, they had just grown so big and so deep, because those roots really dig deep into the earth and they spread like crazy. So I knew that I had to get rid of that sooner than later. before that got even more established and became harder to get rid of. So we finally got rid of that, as well as some additional volunteer trees that started to plant its way into the flower bed. And so luckily that has been removed. And within the next week or so, the landscaper is going to come out here, finish cleaning up this entire bed, and get it prepped and ready for me to plant some new plants. And he's also going to help me clear the space in front of the house. So this whole entire area is going to also become a new bed. And I'm going to be planting a lot of plants there in this space and really just cleaning that up. And that's going to be an extension of what I have here over by the deck that I've actually been adding to this year. So this area of the house gets mostly shade. And so I'm focusing on just filling it up with beautiful ferns, hostas, some other shade-loving plants, and I'm going to expand this. So he's going to help me clean this up as well and remulch the bed. This is a lot of heavy clay soil in our area. And so the soil right there in front of the house it was so hard to dig into because of that heavy clay and how dry it's been. Even though we did have a couple days recently of rain, it just wasn't nearly enough to really penetrate and get into the soil too deeply. And so a lot of those plants were even starting to suffer a little bit. So I'm going to keep an eye on that, continue to water it, take care of it with those new plants that I just planted. And then around the other side of the deck here, I will be planting some new plants as well once that area is prepped and ready. So he's going to help me completely weed that, create the bed, and mulch it, make it look nice, do some edging for me as well. And so that way this entire part of the house will be in really good shape, especially going into the next year. So I'm excited about that. He's also going to help me trim our bushes in the front because those are out of control and they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful bushes. However, I mean, you can see they are just getting so big, especially with the invasive wild grape that's growing on the top there into the house. So those are just so huge and I need to tame them a little bit better. So he's going to also trim those up and make that a better space. The landscaper will be here next week to help me prepare these beds for new plantings and get rid of the invasive ones. But until then, I've been cleaning out the old, transplanting what I can, and adding new plants to the space.
Well, I'd rather go and journey where the diamond crest is flowing, and run across the valley beneath the sacred mountain, and wander through the forest where the trees have leaves of prisms that break the light in colors that no one knows the names of. And when it's time, I'll go and wait beside a legendary fountain till I see her form reflected in its clear and jewel waters. And if you think I'm ready, you may lead me to the chasm where the rivers of our vision run into one another.
Now that the weather is changing and getting cooler, it has me feeling reinvigorated and ready to dive into more projects. The change of seasons, especially the ones that are in between the extremes of summer and winter, such as fall and spring, are the seasons I love the most. There's just something about the in-between that feels magical to me. It's transformative, the space between light and dark, cold and hot. It's as though you have the best of both worlds, the bridge between realms, where everything feels perfectly balanced, yet there is so much power in it because it's full of change. It's a time of clearing out or ushering in the new, bringing in new life, or taking it away. And even though fall is about taking it away, as things begin to die, there's a powerful movement that begins, a necessary one that takes us into the inner depths of winter, the underworld, where all spirit must go to gather its power and strength before emerging back into the world in new form and in new light. Mother Nature's long inhale before she exhales again to bring new life into the world.